everyone. This is Gail Estella, and welcome to the Gail Estella Survival Podcast. Here's where we turn pain into purpose, because survival isn't a whisper, it's a roar. Now, I need you to do a couple of things for me before we get started. I need you to go in and like, comment, and share the Gail Estella Survival Podcast. Next, I need you to tell me, where are you tuning in from? I'm here in Aiken, South Carolina. Where are you? And are you following me on all of my social media platforms? If not, go in and do so. And lastly, right here, Through It All by Gail Estella. Have you purchased your copy yet? If not, it's not too late. You can go to truevinepublishingcompany.org and amazon.com or anywhere books are sold. You want to get this book. For the month of June, in honor of Father's Day, I will be interviewing men only. They will be sharing their stories on how they survived through it all. And my next guest, I can say so much about this young man. We're going to say man of God, husband and father, Demorrious Robinson. Mr. Morris Robinson, I am so glad you're here.
Listen, I'm glad to be here. Thank you for the opportunity. I know we've done so many different things, and today, being a part of this for Father's Day, man, I'm super excited. Anybody that know me, I often joke with my wife. I say, I'm a better father than I am husband, right? Just because of some of the things that I've grown up experiencing over the years. And we'll talk about a little bit of it in this podcast. But I'm super excited. As you said, a man of many hats. Podcast studio owner, photography studio, business professional, business coach, and all those other things in between. So I'm super excited, man, for this opportunity to be one of your selected men for your podcast this month.
Thank you. And before we go any further, anytime you watch my podcast live in person, this is the young man that's producing them. So
Yep. Cool.
Well. Yes.
Mm-hmm.
So let's go back to the beginning. Let's go back to your childhood. Tell us about your childhood.
So, man, it's a childhood that, I'm grateful for every step of it. I'm grateful for all of the ups, the downs, all of those challenges, because I believe all of those things made me who I am now. I grew up in Rock Hill, South Carolina. I usually start off saying I grew up in Boyd Hill, but that's not I did grow up in Boyd Hill, but before Boyd Hill, I grew up at 1150 Flint Street Extension. I lived with my grandmother, grew up in that old school area, or that old school period where it wasn't a such thing as a single family home. It was a home where I remember me living there, my mom, my sister, my grandmother, my great grandmother. There was times with my aunties and some of my cousins, like literally all of us stayed under the same roof, right? So grew up in that. And if you notice in the process of that, I set my mother, my grandmother, et cetera, and not getting too far ahead, but my father didn't live with us then, so it was my father coming to visit and things of that nature. But then I think I was going to the 4th grade, and my mom moved to Boyd Hill projects, where that's where my father's from that side of the track, so we went over there, and I saw him more frequently then, but he still at the time wasn't officially living with us. But literally stayed there up until got ready to go off to college. Me, my mom, my sister at the time, and just what life threw at us, right? I was super excited about all those challenges, not at that time, but those are the things that shaped me into the man and the father that I am now. So when I say that, I jokingly say I'm a better father than I am husband. There's a lot of truth to that statement, right? For me, we learn two ways, right? We learn by what we learn from what to do and what not to do, right? And so growing up, not seeing my father on an everyday basis, right? It put me in a position where I knew what those gaps were that I experienced in my childhood. I knew what those challenges were in my childhood. So for me, it was important that when God did bless me with children, that all of those holes, right, I would plug them, because I know what it felt like, right? I knew what it felt like, playing football and, looking to the right and not seeing that support system, or playing basketball, which was my primary sport, and, looking in the stands, and the person that's cheering for you at the time was your other teammates' parents, right? So me, if you know anything about me, I'll never miss anything that my kids are doing, just because I never want them to feel that. Matter of fact, I'm not sure when this will air, but just I think it was Wednesday, I flew up to Boston, was up there for work, flew back Saturday, was supposed to get back Saturday night, changed my schedule to get back Saturday morning so I could jump right back in the car and drive 4 hours to take my son to a a high jump camp or a college visit or something of that nature.
Right.
But it just, but that's who I am.
That's who you are. Okay, so growing up in the house without your dad, who was your father figure at that time?
So
did you have one?
Yeah. So the cool thing about it was, unlike some of my friends or colleagues or what have you in Boy Hill, I was still connected to my grandmother, right? It wasn't one of those things where, like, sometimes you move and you go to another city and you don't have the support system. We still had the support system. For me, it was my Uncle Kuda. His birthday was just the other day. He God bless his soul, he's in heaven now. But he was one that was that father figure, right? And let me say this also. So not to paint my father in like this like deadbeat type of role or anything like that. Because my father did come. My father did come over and visit. And matter of fact, I remember, those Fridays when he would come over. I was a Lego kid, so he would come over and he would bring me Legos, or he would take me to buy those, right? But it was just the dynamics didn't allow him to live there, right? And so respectfully, we did have those moments where we had those fatherly moments and things of that nature. But to have that consistent 24-hour a day under the same roof, that was the thing that wasn't,
eat dinner,
the status quo.
Come home from school and
nah.
You're going to have to, I'm a storyteller, so I got to tell you another story that shows me. This is the first time I saw my father cry. I remember we were sitting outside the movie theater, waiting for the movie to start, and we are going to go in, and there was this man who couldn't talk, and he knocked on our door, and he mouthed, and then he wrote down on a piece of paper that he needed some money, he needed some money for some medicine, and he needed to get back to his family. And I remember my dad looking, and my dad worked very hard. So just to give you some context, my dad had to drop out of school in the 8th grade to support his family. He's one of 13. Okay. And so all of his jobs were manual labor, very hard on his body or whatever. So he worked hard for what he had. And I remember all of us sitting in the car waiting to go in, and this man comes, and my dad pulls out this money, and I watch a tear fall from his eye. And he gave the man the money, and I believe he gave the man the money that we would have gotten snacks with. And I remember my mom looking at him saying, "It's okay, baby. It's okay. Go ahead." And so for me, I saw that compassion, emotion could be coupled with strength. Whenever I saw my father emotional, it was right before he was about to give his all.
I didn't answer it in full detail, but I think you said at what point did I realize I was different? I think that was part of the question before this one. I'll say something that's probably not the most popular thing, but I realized God allowed me to realize I was different, right? Not initially because of my academic success, but because of my insecurities. And so because of my insecurities, it forced me to realize that I was different. right? From the glasses that were like super thick, right? The glasses, the gap, that I had, a lot of those insecurities, a lot of those things that, other kids may say something about or something like that. It let me know then that I was different. And so I think it allowed me to position myself to be in a space where I didn't take on a lot of the yuck and the muck of my surrounding, right? Because I was different. I knew I wasn't really allowed in some of those circles, or I wasn't welcome, I should say, in some of those circles initially because of those insecurities or issues, right? But then, so in the process of that, I really just started like reading, right? I started reading. I started just like expanding my vocabulary. I started, huh?
Who introduced you to books?
So it was probably when I got to middle school. No, I'm sorry. Fourth grade, because I was at Independence. Then I went to Mount Gallant and then middle school. But so it was that fourth grade, fifth grade period where, we would go to the book fair, and it went from buying the posters of cars, right, to, my teacher saying, hey, try this book right here. And I still remember to this day the book that got me hooked was The Boxcar Children, right?
Yeah,
I got that series, and I started reading that series, and then it was always another mystery and another mystery. So it was like this thing that fueled me to just want to continue to like grow verbally and just in knowledge bases. And so that's kind of what introduced me to it. And that's when I realized like, okay, something's different. And then I did have those moments where the teacher started writing my parents saying, hey, your kid's gifted, or your kid's testing above the norm, right? And I think that started to then put me on a trajectory where at school I was around different kids, but when I got back to the neighborhood, I was back with my normal kids.
So let's talk about the insecurities. The glasses, you said the gap. Were there any other insecurities, maybe because of the fact that your dad didn't live with you, or you came from a single parent home, or was that the norm in the neighborhood?
Yeah, so that those things were kind of the norm, right? Like there were some times where like this kid over here, he may have gotten more, because of what his dad did or what have you. So you would kind of see some of that in the neighborhood. But as far as like the surroundings, if you will, it was never really one of those issues. It was more or less like just knowing that, you got to, like that kind of stuff, or you're afraid of showing, huh?
Were you ever bullied?
I wouldn't say bullied, because the funny part was, even though those moments happen, I'm an extroverted introvert. So I was still like with the cool kids, right? There were still kids that knew who I was at the core. So I never experienced like any outright bullying. But it was those moments where like somebody might say something that didn't know you, right? Or you may hear a joke about something that may come from somebody that didn't know you. But all in all, it was just those little insecurities that were more physical in nature.
Okay, not the internal things, but the physical. Okay, so insecurities. Because a lot of times when we use that word, a lot of people don't want to face the fact or say that they've had some forms of insecurities. So do you believe at some point in life, everyone experienced some type of insecurities?
I think so, because the thing about life is people grow at different rates, right? And if you're not in a place where people celebrate your growth rate, right? There's always space or room for people to call out the fact that you're not like somebody else. You know what I mean? Be it, you may not have a Fortune 500 job. You may be working in a plant or whatever. So you may not have some of the things that other people have. But when you're around people who know that life is a process, it's a constantly moving thing. It puts you in a place where you're okay, but everybody's not in that spot. So for me, I just try to keep pressing forward, right? And make sure that I remind people no matter where they are. And I think I'll say this real quick and I'll throw it back to you. I remember when I was young and I stayed with my grandmother was the custodian of a church, well, a couple of churches, right? And so she would go and literally clean up after the office staff or after the church congregants and things of that nature. And not only was it she was doing that for black churches, but she also did it for a white church, right? And so just because I'm socially aware, that janitor, quote unquote, could be viewed as the lowest person on the totem pole.
Right.
And so for me, I've always had that in the back of my mind that my grandmother was deemed by some people the lowest person on the totem pole in the hierarchy. So I try to make sure that I respect everybody, no matter where they are in their process of life.
Thank you for all the overwhelming support that you have shown me on the release of my first book, Through It All. And I would like to give a special thank you to all of you that have purchased your copy of Through It All. I would like to read a review to you. Hey Gail, I just finished reading your beautiful book. God has done some amazing transformation in your life. You are definitely a testament. Love you, girl. Thank you. If you purchase your book, and once you finish reading your copy of Through It All, please leave me a review, or better yet, a short video snippet of you telling your takeaways from Through It All. There are so many girls and women that are suffering in silence. They need to know that no matter what it is that they've gone through, no matter what it is that they're going through, that through it all, that they will be okay. And if you haven't purchased your copy of Through It All, let's get the word out that through it all, that you can still stand. Through it all, you can still thrive. Through it all. Thank you.
I'm one of those people who I'm probably not going to learn it on my own by going through it. If I see you go through it, I'm one of those people that's like, well, if that happened to him, let me kind of, shift a little bit. And I remember, go ahead.
That's being smart, because most people have to experience it to learn it. I was one that had to experience it. So you were the smart one that you can look at someone else's situation or circumstances.
Yeah, and I think strategically God put me in places like that, right? Where he showed me like, hey, here's the reality of what your situation could be if you continue down this road, right? It's not that I never got on the road. It was that once I got on the road, God showed me a sign and I knew what the signs were, right? It's almost like when you're getting ready to get your permit. One of the first things they teach you is you have to learn how to read the signs, right? Because if you don't read the signs, then you're going to end up in danger. And so for me, going through life, like I learned how to read the signs. And one of the pivotal moments was when one of my cousins had gotten into some trouble, and he had in what they call an auxiliary probation officer. And he would come to the house and and this was my grandmother's house at the time, and he would, meet with my cousin and things of that nature. And that guy ended up, he's actually Reverend Dub Massey, right? Who's one of my mentors to this day. One of the reasons why I wear this KSI, watch, because I saw a man who cared about other people. And I knew, and I could hear those stories of how he was talking to my cousin on the front porch. And I'm just like, okay, he's saying like, hey, if you continue down this road, not talking to me, but my cousin saying, if you continue down the road, this is going to be an outcome. And so for me, I'm hearing this. And at the same time, I'm starting to think do self-reflection. And so those are some of the things that kind of put me back on the right track to kind of really say, okay, I don't want to jeopardize my future for the present.
That's very astute of you at such a young age. Very, very. So you are married.
I am.
You
Yep.
met your wife in high school. How were you when you and your wife got together? You could tell us about that.
Man,
Kendra.
we started dating my junior year of high school. And it's fun. I'll tell you a funny story because she'll watch this at some point and she'll be like, I can't believe you told that story. She didn't like me at first, right? Like, she was one of those girls that was like, look, if you're going to go out with me, I'm going to make you work. Because first off, you're not even the type that I would even date. So I pursued her, right? Like, I'm chasing after her, like the song said. And we started dating. She gave me an opportunity. And now, 3 kids later, 22 years later, being married and adding like 3 years before that. So almost 25 years that we've been together. And, you said something earlier. You asked me, was my parents married? And, kind of segueing into the next part is like, I never saw what I was supposed to be as a husband, right? Because when I saw my uncle, he went back home to his wife, right, who was married. Some of my aunts and uncles that would come to visit, like, we would see them in the moment, but then they leave, right? And so once I got to that point of being married, like, I didn't know what marriage was. I didn't know, like, what I was supposed to be doing, how I was supposed to move and things of that nature, because my parents weren't, So that's kind of where I grew up at and how that worked out.
Excuse me, did you ever at some point growing up, seeing your parents together, but not married, did you ever ask your dad why hadn't he married your mom? Or did you ever ask your mother why weren't they married? Or why do you stay with the man that had married you? Did those conversations ever come up?
So one of the things I tell people is that many times you're a product of your environment, right? So when I think back over the genealogy or the pathology or what have you of my mother's side, right? Like, I never recall my grandmother being married, right? I never recall my great grandmother being married, right? So the fact that my parents weren't married, it wasn't weird to me, if that makes sense, right? It was kind of normal, because I think, with the exception of like a handful of my aunties and one uncle, like, really none of them. I mean, my uncle Kuda, my aunt Yvonne, Lisa, Deb, like, some of them were married, but then I had like the same amount that was married. I probably had the same amount that weren't, right? So it wasn't like this was the norm. But for me, I'll say this. I realized that in that moment when I had Mackenzie, I realized that I never wanted anything to tell me that I couldn't be there for her, right? I didn't want, government rules or a lack of a title or whatever to tell me that I couldn't be what I needed, because I knew what I was lacking. So I wanted to make sure from that day on, February 9, 2002, that she would never have the story that I had. Now, did I always get it right? Absolutely not. Because you asked the question earlier, you said, did you ever ask the question, why weren't y'all married? Well, there was a moment where, I don't even know if it was me asking, but there was a moment where my mom made it clear that due to my dad having some personal struggles, that she wasn't going to marry him until he got those struggles under control, right?
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah, but again, like, I still didn't really know what that meant. I just knew that before they would take that next step, there were some things internally that he needed to resolve. And until he did that, she had made a declaration that she wouldn't. And she loved him. And she was willing to work with him and walk through it. And that's why, she never walked away or any of that, because that love was there. And she knew that if he could get past that hurdle, that he would be the man that she fell in love with back in the 70s.
So has he gotten past the hurdle?
Absolutely. I'll say this. For me, it was one of those things where those struggles kind of made my I won't say childhood, but yeah, my childhood and my teenage years made it a little difficult, right? There were some moments where, I saw some things that were a direct result of some of those personal challenges and struggles. And, it affected our relationship for a while, right? But then once I got older, I remember I asked him a question one day. I sat down and I told him, I said, hey, do me a favor. Tell me your story. And when he began to share his story, right, it put a lot of things into perspective. It reminded me and it showed me that, A, I can't be judgmental of anybody not knowing all the story, right? B, I had to have compassion for people. And C, I had to always believe in redemption because I wanted him to be what I needed him to be. And now, like, literally, that guy's like my best friend. You know what I mean? Like he is absolutely one of the men that I respect, I honor, I celebrate. There's nothing that I have that he could ask for that I wouldn't give. That's how much I love him.
My book, Through It All, Gail Estella. This book has 6 powerful chapters, offering a quick and meaningful read filled with uplifting and empowering insights. Let's take a look. Here's the front, Through It All, Gail Estella. True Vine Publishing. And in the back, there's a place for you to take notes. You're going to want to take notes. I'm an author. I am that author. Gail Estella, the author. If I can say anything to you, it would be, do not give up on your dreams. Do not give up on your dreams because they can come true. I am a true testament to this.
Okay.
Because how long have you and Kendra been married?
We've been married 22 years.
So for me being newly married, and for someone else that's watching, how does a person at 22, how does a person at 20 get married and survive for 22 years?
So I often tell people that you have to know who it is that you're marrying, right? And at the core of it, you have to be friends. You have to have a genuine liking for this person. And I tell people this. I said, think about it this way. If you weren't married and you were single and this person was single, could you see this person being a part of your day-to-day life? Right? Like take the rings, sit them to the side. If you don't have the title, could you see this person in some kind of way being a part of your day-to-day life? And I think a lot of people, they get it wrong because they don't get that part right? Because they start to build their relationship on something else, what he can provide for me or what she looks like or, some of those things. And so then when those things begin to shift or those things begin to change, right? There is no foundation. There is no substance. But the fact that, for me, coming from Boy Hill Projects, my goal, my only, my only expectation from my mother as it related to education was, hey, graduate high school, right? And I did that without a problem. Tried college, but it wasn't really a thing that my mom was like, hey, you got to go to college. So when I didn't like it, I stopped. Right. I had some jobs where I'm like, all right, I can just stay here and retire. But those things wasn't the fulfillment or the epitome of who I am today. And my wife was always like, yo, there's more to you. There's more inside of you. And so she's always pushed me to always strive. Now, I'm looking at my York Tech graduation robe. On this wall next to me is my Winthrop graduation robe. And in August, I'll be enrolling in Columbia College down in Columbia, working on my master's. So like career wise, my wife has always pushed me. So for me, the fact that we have that thing where we want to see the best for each other, right, is the thing that I believe was amazing.
And so that was going to be my next question. You said, rings aside, could you see yourself with this person? So basically, are you saying that you have to like the person?
You have
that you need to be friends?
Yeah. Because here's the thing. So when you think about your best friend, right? And this is the analogy I tell people. Think about your best friend and think about a time when they wasn't worthy of being your best friend because of their actions. And then you think about, okay, did I forgive that person? And are they still my best friend? And you say yeah to both of those. You're like, huh. You have those spats, you have those moments of disagreement, but yet you know that there's something deeper than the moment, right? And so when it comes down to marriage, it has to be something deeper than the moment. And I'm not saying, let me say this as a disclaimer, I'm not saying you just endure and put up with anything. That's not what I'm saying. But what I am saying is when some of those challenges of life come, right, you have to have something that's bigger than that moment. And if you have something that's bigger than that moment, then you're able to endure it, you're able to weather it, and you're able to, continue to add, more years to that journey that you guys took.
So do you feel that your spouse should be your best friend?
I think I think they should definitely be one of your best friends.
Okay.
Right?
Because a lot of people say, he's my best friend, she's my best friend. And I always wonder, is that a criteria for a successful marriage, for your mate to be your very best friend?
So I think it comes down to what's a person's perception and definition of best friend, right? Because when we say best friend, are there things that can you tell your spouse anything without fear of judgment?
Can you tell Kendra anything?
I can tell her
everything.
She wants me to tell her anything without fear of judgment, but I'm a guy, and because I guess guys sometimes we struggle with being vulnerable, right? But there is a level of conversation, a level of trust where I'm able to come to her and say, hey, XYZ, right? And she's able to kind of help me navigate this and navigate that. But I think it comes down to, what's a person's definition of a best friend, right? And I think people will say, yeah, you can tell a person anything, but then I challenge them to say, really, really think about your darkest secret. Would you tell that person that? And would that person help navigate you through it, or would they judge you and not be there to help you get past it, right?
Or bring it back up at another time.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So vulnerability, men and being vulnerable.
Yep.
Do you cry?
I do.
What are some of the things that have caused you to cry? So recently, let's just say recently.
So I would say one of the things about me is I'm always trying to provide for my family in a way that gives them the best experience of life, right? So there's times when I think I put so much pressure on myself to deliver those things, to be that person, to, hit that home run when a single will do, right? But it's because I'm trying to make sure that my family doesn't have to endure any of the struggles or heartaches that I dealt with. So for me, the biggest thing lately that I've been crying, that I've cried about hasn't necessarily been about me, but I'm really starting to slow down my life and really deal with grief. And so those are some of the things that now I'm really starting to have happen at moments that you didn't anticipate, right? You wasn't looking forward to, but they just kind of happened. When you mentioned my grandmother, like, I don't know if you saw me, but I rocked, because there's still some undealt with emotions that are there. But as a guy, we're programmed to have to keep going. So lately I've been slowing down and really allowing myself to feel those feelings.
To feel the feelings. That's very important. And we're going to get back to that, but it's something you said that you do because you are a man of many hats. You do a lot of things. And you said because you want your family to be able to experience some of the things that you never had. So can some of that be that you just want to prove to yourself that you're capable of doing this, that you can do this, for the fulfillment within yourself because of the things that you didn't have?
So the funny thing for me, like self accomplishment or self gratification is not something that's really even high on my list, right?
Okay.
And I don't know. I think it's because, you know, growing up with a normal set of expectations, right? I think that put me in a place where I never felt the need to have to be more than, you know what I mean? It was because like every one of the expectations that I had from my mother growing up, I exceeded it, right? So I have that internal peace of knowing that, you know, everything that I do now is about legacy. A couple years ago, I think when I crossed into 40, I really started to think about, okay, this next decade, I want to begin to solidify and solidify my legacy, right? My legacy after I'm gone. Have I put my children or my family in a place that their lives are better because I lived?
That's good. That's good. Do you think their lives will be better because you live?
Absolutely. And I say that humbly. I say that with all humility in my body, because there's a lot of things that I probably shouldn't have overcome, but I did by the grace of God, right? There's a lot of things. My story should have been a whole lot different. Coming from Boyd Hill, and I think it was probably about 20 some odd of us, and you can probably count on one hand the number of us that graduated high school, right? You can, you know, count on one hand the number of us that graduated college. You know, you can count on one hand the number of us that have more than one degree, right? You can count on probably, you know, one hand the number of us who are homeowners. You know, I saw something the other day, and not for any other, you know, personal gratification or anything like that, but I saw something the other day that talked about how much money a person makes that puts them within, I think it's like the top 2% of those in the world. And by the grace of God, I've been able to reach that number, right? And so I'm just grateful, man. Every day I just wake up grateful because I know this shouldn't have been my story. My story should have been something drastically different. And because I've given my kids such a start, you know, now they'll be able to put their kids further down the road than I put them.
That's a blessing. So grief.
Yep.
Loss.
Yep.
When you think about grief and loss, what is it that you feel? Because I know people come to you for counseling. What is it that you feel that keep men from being vulnerable with their spouses, less on with anybody else? You know, the one place where they could just lay their head on the pillow or lay their head on their spouse's shoulder or chest and just cry or let it all out. Where has it, or where does it come from that, or where do you think it comes from that men are supposed to show vulnerability, men are supposed to cry, and they hold their grief, they hold their pain inside until it festers, causes all type of diseases and illnesses amongst us, the disparities among us, black men, black women as well. So where do you think that comes from, and how can that be changed?
So I'll say this. I think, and I firmly believe it, especially because of, and you know, as an African American male, you see my backdrop, my guys. But I think society has caused us to have to quote unquote live the Superman syndrome, right? For as far back as you can remember, as it related to a black man, we've always had to be the biggest. We've always had to be the strongest. We've always had to be this, right? all the way back from slavery, right? And if you weren't, you were less than, right? And we were bred to be that person.
Right.
And so for us, we grow up and we have this thing where we have to provide for our family. We have to, like, we get no days off, and per se. And I think what happens with that, the byproduct of it is we have to then suppress our emotions. We have to suppress, what it is that we feel, because we can't say, I don't feel like it today, right? You just got to get up and you got to go get it done. And so in the process of that, I think us as men, we have created this space in our spouses and in our families where we've created this picture of like Superman, right? We wasn't, many of us weren't given the permission to let our children or our family see us vulnerable, right? And so for me, I'm grateful that as I've gotten older, I'm starting to allow my children to see that side of me, especially my boys, and especially my daughter. Me and my daughter went to dinner one day, and we were talking about a really, really tough subject, and literally I sat across the table from her and cried. And now my prayer is that moment when she does start, dating seriously, get to a point of marriage, like she'll create an atmosphere as a nurturer that gives him the space of knowing that, I can be vulnerable and I don't have to worry about being judged from it.
So how about with your boys? Because I know Mackenzie is 4. What about, and I know all of them are, but Mackenzie's the girl. So what about Kyle and Channing? Do you sit and talk to them about vulnerability? Do you sit and talk to them about emotions? That it's okay to express their feelings. It's okay to not always have to be so hard, that they could just let their shoulders down, slump if they need to, and just be in the moment. Because we all have moments that we just need to be able to, bask in the moment. Just like, I don't need to be lifted up right now. I just want to just stay here for a minute and let it be okay. Do you talk to them about those certain things?
I do. And the thing is, kind of going back to what I mentioned, like, realizing what I didn't have as a kid, right? And wanting to make sure that, if there's a checklist that's somewhere in heaven or somewhere on earth that, recorded everything that I didn't have, when my time passes, that checklist be complete, right? Everything that I didn't have, I gave it to them. My boys are, and my wife would tell you, like, my boys are literally like, I think the way that I feel about my father, I feel in reverse about my boys. Like, Shannon went off to college 2 years ago, and literally, like, I went through a moment that was like, it was rough, right? And then Kyle, he's getting ready to go off to school in just a couple of weeks, and it's one of those things where I'm like, we sit together, we talk together, we fellowship together. In my phone, I have probably 1,000 family text groups. I have, the Robinson 5 is what we call ourselves, me, my wife, and the 3 kids. And then I have me and the kids. And then I have me and the boys. Then I have me and Shannon. Then I have me and Kyle. Then I have me and Mackenzie, right? Because I realize I have to be different things at different times to everybody.
Wow.
And so I try to make sure I create that space where, all of my kids got me one-on-one. My boys have me as their father. My daughter has me as her father. But then my kids have me as their overarching father, right? And then my wife has me, and then our family has me as well. So,
do you ever get tired of carrying those roles?
Not my family roles. Not my family roles. Because one of the things that I understand about fatherhood is, and I often tell my kids a lot of times, I say, none of you guys asked to be here. You know what I mean? Like none of y'all asked to be here. Every last one of y'all are here because of a decision that your mom and I made. So I can never get to a point that you guys become too heavy for me to carry, because the weight wouldn't exist if it wasn't for a choice that I made.
Wow. That's awesome. So now, Minister, Pastor, Demorrious Robinson, again,
Yep.
you get this knock. God
Okay.
is telling you it's time. So tell us about that.
So for one, go ahead.
And when you receive the knock, did you open the door? Or you put a deadbolt on the door, like, nope, you're not talking to me, God.
That's where I was getting ready to go, right? So I didn't grow up saying, "Hey, I want to be a pastor, I want to be a preacher, I want to be whatever." I didn't say any of that, right? I just said I want to make a difference, right? And I think I did that, in friendships and things of that nature. But when the call came, my wife will tell you, when the call came, I tell people, I literally tried to disqualify myself. I tried to put myself in a place where God would be like, ain't no way in the world I call this fool, right? Like, let's change our mind. Let's go get someone else. But little did I know, man, God was still sitting right there waiting. Like, all right, you done? You finished? Now there's just more that you got to tell, right? And so because of that, I'm grateful, and I always tell people I'm grateful that God could believe that he could use somebody like me, right? I'm grateful.
So what was the experience? What was the time? Because I'm quite sure you remember when you submitted to your calling.
So it was fun. Yeah, it was funny because I knew I had to go. I had to say yes, but I was like, maybe he'll change his mind, but he didn't. And I remember, like, I had got deep into, so then I was like, all right. So I tried to be the worst I can be, and that didn't work. So then I said, okay, well, maybe if I start coming to church like on a everyday Sunday, sit in the front of the church, and help the people in the church, and come to Bible study, Sunday school. Maybe that'll be enough, right? Maybe that'll be enough. But it wasn't. And I remember I would open up the Bible and I would begin to just read scriptures, and God would start like downloading messages, and I would write these messages out and put them in a manila envelope. I would come to Bible study and I would give it to my pastor, Pastor W.W. Thompson, who's also a Kappa. And so I would give him these envelopes, and he would just put them in his briefcase. He would put them in his briefcase. And one day I remember I went to my grandmother Mag's house, who we talked about earlier. And I remember sitting at her table. She was in there cooking, and I was like, Grandma, I feel like God is calling me to ministry. And her response was, well, you gotta go. There's people waiting on you. And I think at that moment, that was the green light. That was the thing that allowed me to believe internally that I could do it. Because it wasn't initially that I felt like I could do it through the power of God. It was, can I even do this? And going back to my grandmother and her being someone who I know without a shadow of a doubt would give me the truth. And when she said, baby, there's people waiting on you. And so you got to say yes. And that's the moment when I just surrendered and was like, all right, God. So when I went to my pastor and I told him, he was like, I knew a long time ago, but I had to wait for you to get it, And so now, man, Shannon's 20. So Kyle's 18. So literally almost their entire lives, almost. I've been standing up preaching the gospel. So how did it affect the marriage in the beginning? Was Kendra rough. On board, or you hear some people say, "Well, I didn't marry a pastor, so how?" He was called to the ministry, not me. So how did it affect your marriage at all? It did to a degree. Right? Because my kids. So Mackenzie's 23, Shannon's 20, and Kyle is 18. And so Shannon will be he just turned 20. And then Kyle will be turning 19. So my boys are only 18 months apart. And so, like I said, I've been preaching almost there. Like up until recently, I've been the only pastor that they've ever had. Right. And so it was two young kids, one barely walking, her carrying a carrier, Mackenzie also, running around or what have you. So it was a lot of pressure on her, right? And again, much like being a father, I didn't really have it modeled. I knew that God called me, but I didn't really know how to be this, right? And I remember it was years later that, I started pastoring, and I put my church underneath the fellowship of Bishop Crump. And, I remember that, like, he modeled for me what being a husband, pastor, father was, right? Like, oh, Josh got a baseball game. Hey, I'll see y'all next week. Right?
Yeah, I was going to say, he did. That was my pastor, my bishop.
And so it began to show me how to navigate it. It began to show my wife how to navigate those spaces. And I think, over the years, we've learned a lot now where we're actually trying to pour into other young couples that are pursuing ministry, right? Just to kind of let them know that there can be a balance. There can be space where you can turn off the pastoral hat and be what she needs, or, turn off the pastoral hat and take care of your kids, because sometimes pastors and leaders, we get so caught up in the calling that we forget, what we're supposed to be taking care of.
Wayside.
Yeah.
Okay, so you pastored your church for how long?
Man, we pastored New Life for 13 years, maybe, I think.
13 years. So did you decide to stop pastoring? What made you walk away from, I don't know if walking away is the right word, but what made you
do it
stop
different?
Pastoring? What made you stop pastoring?
So what happened was, and it's funny. So when I said yes, I bargained with God. I said, all right, by the time I turn 55, I'm done. You can't have me no more, right? So we try to make those bargains and things of that nature. But, my kids, like I said, they're literally 3 years between all three of them, and together from the top to the youngest, there's a 3-year span. And so they were going into their pivotal years, right? They were going into the years where they needed their father. They needed their father. And I think we've all heard the stories, and some of them are horror stories. Some of them are great stories about PKs, right? But we went through that period where I was like, you know what? Let me make sure that I be what my kids need me to be. And I'll tell you, I'll never forget, my daughter told me, because we had a conversation about it one day after, because what I did was I merged my church into another church, and I went on staff as the executive pastor. And in the process of that, I remember having a conversation, and my daughter was like, I miss, our community. I miss the people that we were pastoring. And that's why I always say we pastored our church for 13 years, because as we went through the journey, right, my wife got to a point where, she loved every one of those members, and she was there to help every one of those members. And, my kids were always there to greet that kid who was new to the church and things of that nature. So I always talk about it as being a joint effort. But then I knew that in that season, it was time for me to give them what they needed. Right. And I prayed about it, and I believe God gave me the grace to do ministry different. And now, I can't imagine myself doing pastoring the way that I know it should be done, and being the father that I am today.
Thank you for all the overwhelming support that you have shown me on the release of my first book, Through It All. And I would like to give a special thank you to all of you that have purchased your copy of Through It All. I would like to read a review to you. Hey Gail, I just finished reading your beautiful book. God has done some amazing transformation in your life. You are definitely a testament. Love you, girl. Thank you. If you purchase your book, and once you finish reading your copy of Through It All, please leave me a review, or better yet, a short video snippet of you telling your takeaways from Through It All. There are so many girls and women that are suffering in silence. They need to know that no matter what it is that they've gone through, no matter what it is that they're going through, that through it all, that they will be okay. And if you haven't purchased your copy of Through It All, let's get the word out that through it all, that you can still stand. Through it all, you can still thrive. Through it all, thank you.
So how does your ministry look today? You said doing ministry differently. So how does it look for you today?
So for me, man, I believe life is ministry. I believe that, you know, one of the things that I forget who it was. I think might have been Bishop T.D. Jakes or somebody that I heard a sermon one time that they talked about going beyond ministry and doing ministry in the workspace or in the workplace, I think was the term that he used. And it was, okay, you can just impact the people that you see on Sunday, or you can believe that you can impact everybody you see.
Yeah.
You know, and so I kind of shifted my focus there. I still go to churches and preach from time to time. At the church that we're a part of right now, I'm actively involved with the youth ministry. I do church consults. So like I go in and help churches kind of navigate challenges here or there, be it people or systems or equipment or whatever, right? So I'm still doing ministry, and I think I'm doing it in a way now where it's more fulfilling because it doesn't have the ties or the constraints that, you know, being a traditional, you know, pastor would have. Yeah.
So Demorrious Robinson, husband, father, man of God, doing ministry differently. Are you proud of who you are today?
Extremely, because I always go back to the place of saying my life should have been different. My life should have been different. And I don't say that in a way that I'm like, what's the word? Thinking that it should have been. I'm just mindful that it could have been.
That it could have been.
And so I'm super proud because, you know, 22 years of marriage. My daughter's 23. She's finishing her last semester of college. My oldest son, I flew back from Boston the other day. I was going to take a personal day in Boston and get back that night, but I changed it to get back at like 9 or 10 so I could take him on a 4-hour trip because he's transferring colleges. So, you know, today we spent an hour and a half navigating the nuances of that. So he's going into his junior year. My youngest son, he's, you know, getting ready to go to the Citadel, a military college here in the state. None of them have ever really given me any major trouble. Career-wise, I've been successful. Educationally, I've exceeded my wildest dreams. So I'm super proud of where I am, and more excited about, you know, what's left to do.
What's left to do. So if there's anything that you could have done differently, what would that have been, and what point in time would it have been? If there's anything that you could look back and say, if I had the opportunity to do something over again, I would have done this.
I jokingly tell my kids, so I was a basketball player and had an opportunity to play collegiately. And I jokingly tell my kids that if I was about 4 inches taller, they never would have been born. Because I would have been in the NBA, or I would have been somewhere playing professionally. So that's like the running joke that me and my boys have. I don't tell that joke in front of my wife at all. You know, but when I look back over my life, I don't think there's anything that I would have done different. I don't think that there's any point where I felt like I should have done this or should have done that. one of the things that I've learned is raising kids and raising young adults, I should say now, not kids, but raising young adults, you know, and they'll tell you that I've always raised them to learn how to make decisions on their own, make solid, sound decisions on their own. And I would always tell them, I say, because there's going to be a day when your father's not going to be here. So I need to know that when I'm gone, that I've prepared all of you to make a decision that you can live with the results.
You can live with the results.
And so everything that I've done, like, you know, some of them have had great consequences and some of them had terrible consequences. But even in the midst of what appeared to be a bad consequence, I don't believe in failure. So when I think about all of that, like even what people perceive as being bad, I automatically say, okay, what's the good that can come out of the situation?
Yeah, the good that's come out of the situation. A young man from Boyd Hill Projects, Demorrious Robinson.
Yep.
This has been good. So I have a couple of questions for you.
What you got?
Who is the most inspirational person in your life? Or who was the most inspirational person?
Man. I would probably say my father. I probably would say my father.
Just through it all, he survived. And I remember asking you something. I remember asking you about your intelligence, your intellect. And you said my father's very smart, but just life circumstances. And life circumstances just can deter us and change the whole trajectory of the outcome of our life.
Yeah. You know,
But then God comes.
I remember asking, I'll always remember that conversation where I asked him to tell me a story. He was in the hospital in the operating room having open heart surgery, and that's the last time he seen his dad, you know, and he was a kid. So I can only imagine what that did psychologically, you know, to a kid. I can only imagine what, you know, questions that created. Was I good enough? Was I not good enough? Like, you know, all of those things. And seeing him battle some of the demons and, you know, things that he struggled with, and seeing who he is now, you know, and there was, you know, he struggled with alcoholism. You know, I'll call that out. He struggled with alcoholism. And the reason why I'll call it out is not to give discredit to anything, right? Because we need different vehicles. We need different pathways to sobriety and freedom. But he literally changed for us.
And how long has he been sober now?
Oh my God, man.
It's been a long time.
Over 23 years. My daughter's 23.
I can remember when it all happened.
And it happened, you know, he didn't go through a 7-step program. He didn't, you know, go to like a deliverance service. He didn't, he just literally said the same thing. I think he probably made the same decision that I made on December the 9th. February the 9th, 2002, when I realized that's the day I became a man. I think that day when he really stepped into the manhood of his life and changed literally cold turkey. He stopped smoking cigarettes, literally cold turkey. He stopped drinking cold turkey. Like to see all of that, right? And my kids have had the best grandfather in the world.
Wow.
That's my biggest inspiration. Like to see all of that and hear all of that and know all of that and see where he is now. It can't be anybody but him.
So mental health sometimes is just about feeling your feelings. Whatever your feelings are, feel your feelings. If you need to scream, if you need to holler, if you need to cry all day, if you need to stay in the bed for that moment, do what it is you need to do, but don't get stuck there. I went to therapy. I went to support groups. I exercised. I took care of myself by eating right. I didn't get into another relationship because now I didn't have, God had took Asia. And so now was my time to be able to give all the love to me that I had given to her. So I nurtured myself. I went on dates by myself, with myself. I took care of myself. I took courses. I got certifications. I opened a salon. I met you during this time. I rebranded myself. I did all of these things during my period of bereavement and during my period of grieving. I made flower arrangements once a month. I spent crazy money on flowers. I went to her grave just about every day, sometimes at night. But I did what I needed to do to allow myself to feel comfortable, to allow myself to feel nearer to my daughter. So do whatever you have to do, but allow yourself the grace. Don't allow yourself to sink, because I always felt if I sunk too far, I wouldn't be able to come back out. And when people are telling you to get over it, or you should be over this by now, regardless of who it is, they haven't walked in your shoes. They don't know your pain. They don't know the hurt. They don't know that hole. So for someone that's struggling with an addiction, as a child of a father that had addiction growing up, as a man with a father that overcame that addiction, what would you say to any kids that might be watching, a wife that might be watching, or a man that's struggling with an addiction? What would you say to them?
I'll deal with it in two folds, because I think the question is a two-folded question. If you're a person that's dealing with someone who has an addiction, if you are the child of someone who is addicted, I want to be careful if it's safe to ask the question, tell me your story, or ask, tell me your story. I think that's important. If you're a spouse who has a spouse who's struggling with addiction, if it's safe, and me and you've had a lot of conversations about substance abuse and things of that nature. I can't think of I know they changed the phrase. It would have been domestic violence.
Abuse disorder.
Yeah.
Substance abuse disorder.
Yeah, and you have to be careful, right? So I'm not saying be reckless and go into a dangerous environment, but if it's an environment where you can ask a question, tell me your story, or you ask them, tell me your story, and if they're willing to share it, there you will find a lot of the whys. And then if they're willing to help you, or if they're willing to allow you to help them and walk with them and dealing with those whys, then you can begin to have that redemption story like me and my father had. I think if I would have never asked the question, tell me your story, I don't think we would be where we are today. But he heard my heart and he gave me his story, and it gave me a different level of understanding. And I realized that he wasn't being that to me. He was trying to overcome what he was feeling and experiencing on the inside, and the things that he was running away from, and he didn't know how to. And I guess by me asking that, maybe that was the thing that said somebody cares. And then that allowed him to be vulnerable. Yeah. And when we talk about men not being vulnerable, that allowed him to be vulnerable. Yeah. Wow. Oh boy, this has been good. Cool.
So this is the Gail Estella Survival Podcast. I want you to name 3 things that have helped you to survive?
I know the cliche-ish thing to say is God, right? My faith. It's true. My faith is definitely one of the things that has allowed me to endure the things that I've endured. I'll say, and I hope I don't get in trouble for this, but I'll say it anyway. So I'll say 4. My mother, who I saw get up in the morning, and she was going to work before me and my sister even got up to go to school. Seeing her sacrifice and her dedication, I think that put that inside of me, that no matter what obstacles I was facing, like, I had to press through it. So that was one of the things that allowed me to survive things that other people would have quit on. My father, of course, we talked about his story, and then, you know, certainly not in any order in terms of people, but my wife, because my desire to become what I am today, she was pivotal in that. And I think if it wasn't her playing the part that she played, I may have not even desired to press, you know, the way that I press. So I would say those 4 things.
Wow, that's awesome. God, your mother, your father, your wife, not in that order.
Yeah, because, you know, I can get in trouble in there. I can get in trouble if I try to put that in an order. So I'm smart.
That's good. That's good. I love you, and
love
you know
you too.
that I do. Yeah. And thank you so very much. Okay.
Yes, ma'am. Listen,
you have a happy Father's Day.
You too. Thank you so much.
Thank
Talk to
you.
you soon.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye. Wow, everyone. Wasn't that a great interview? If you want more of that for the month of June, please stay tuned for the whole month for this series with only men, talking about their vulnerability, the things that they've gone through it all, how they survived. Men have feelings too, and we're going to hear about all of that the month of June, or we're going to hear about all of that this month.